Hello, greetings to one and all. I welcome you to this side event at the 61st session of the UN Commission for Social Development. The overall theme for this side event is overcoming the barriers of full and productive employment, focusing on social, hierarchical, and discriminatory practices based on work and dissent. This event is organized by the Inclusivity Project and the Global Forum of Communities Discriminated on Work and Dissent. Justice Ventures International, the organization with whom I serve, is in solidarity with this initiative. So once again, welcome to you all. I am Vivek Jones. I serve as the Regional Director for Justice Ventures International, and I have the honor of moderating the session today. JVI, Justice Ventures International's mission is to bring freedom, justice, and restoration to women, children, and men suffering from human trafficking and other extreme injustice. And we do this through partnering with local organizations and global stakeholders. Now, as someone who is on the ground, I see the reality of the suffering of the vulnerable whom we are trying to address today and talk about and make visible the conditions of theirs. It is something that we are all passionate about. I am passionate about. And so I am so excited to be with each of you also as we have this discussion. A few words about the communities discriminated based on work and dissent and about their exclusions. Discrimination based on work and dissent is normally associated with notions of purity, pollution, and untouchability practices. It is deeply, deeply rooted in societies and cultures where such discriminations are practiced. As someone from South Asia, I see it all the time. It is just embedded in the systems of the society. And discussions on such communities and such discriminations have often been, unfortunately, limited to the context of caste, which is widely practiced in South Asia and diaspora of South Asians. But here's the fact. CDWD is not limited to South Asia, and most of us over here are well aware of that. It's a global problem. It's a global and complex problem. The Haratin in the Sahel, the Bantu in Sudan, the Roma in Europe and their diaspora, the Burakumin in Japan, the Dalits, formerly known as the Untouchables in South Asia. I mean, these are all just a few examples of the many, many communities that are discriminated based on work and dissent. And these communities are often compelled into forced labor, bonded labor, child labor, and trafficking. And they need special protective measures and promotive development, special interventions, many of these things which many of you are into. And we all need to be there together to address this case. The focus of this side event, which is overcoming the barriers of full and productive employment, focusing on social, hierarchical, discriminatory practices based on work and dissent. This side event will examine measures, both short-term and long-term, that need to be taken up to support CDWD communities to achieve decent and dignified work. And so we have a very interesting and stellar set of speakers today. And the speakers will explore a roadmap and strategic and policy solutions at the international level aimed at making higher pay and more humane work conditions a reality for these communities. Time permitting, we will also have a broader discussion. We will have an open floor where we would call upon you all to ask clarifying questions and possibly maybe even some interventions you think would be helpful. And we have a unique set of speakers on today's panel. We have Isabella Cruz from Brazil, who investigates the practice of slave labor among the Black and African descendant population, and she advocates for them, particularly the Quilombolas. We have then Zeinabu Ibrahim from Mauritania, who works against the institutional and social discrimination against the Hauritine peoples. We also have Griselda Taco from Albania, who is an activist against the contemporary discrimination against the Roma people. And we also have Matsura Aya, who's a gender specialist and represents the ILO as part of the Decent Work Team for South Asia and is based in New Delhi. Once again, welcome to you all. Welcome to the eminent panel. And I will request our speakers for the day to be ready to present, to illuminate, and to highlight, especially, if I may request, to especially focus on your recommendations, because that goes a long way. We would love to hear the narrative of the problem, but your solutions, your recommendations is something I should say I'm eager to hear, and I'm sure all of us on this in this community are eager to hear. So, first of all, I would like to request Ms. Isabella de Cruz from Brazil to present.
Olá, boa
Hello,
tarde, bom
good
dia,
afternoon, good morning.
tudo.
Can I go ahead and say it all?
Yep,
Sou Isabela
thank you.
da Cruz,
My name is Isabella Cruz. I'm from Brazil.
atualmente da região sul do Brasil.
I work in the southern region of Brazil,
Trazer a
and
fala e a voz sobre
today I wanted to
aqui
bring
presentes.
the spotlight
E fiz um
into the
convite
Quilombolan
para
communities here in the
uma
country,
comunidade
and so we formed a collective here with my colleagues Nariane, Giovanni, and Johannes as well to help us and to help us prepare this presentation. We're going to talk about social development, and talking about this, of course, is seems sort of easy, but we know that we have lots of different points to consider, different regional practices in each country, and also we have plenty of things that bring us together, and this is what we're focusing on. And what unites us is the will to change. And so we're looking at these matters, regardless of country wherein we reside. And I'm very thrilled to be here today. And all these transformations at the long, medium, and short term on a global level. And only following these can we provide excellent work. And I'm part of CONANC, which is the group, national group here for the defense of rights of rural Black communities and women of color as well, and the defense of human rights, especially women in Brazil. And the Quilombolan communities are communities of people of color at the national level that are descendants from people that were forced into slavery in the colonial and imperialist period. And these communities, they're deprived of their own territory, and this discrimination then goes on from generation to generation, but so does the transfer of knowledge. And this makes it so that these communities, they're the ones that fight the hardest to preserve and protect the environment. And they work with national communities as well, and the indigenous national communities in Brazil, and other national communities, which are minority groups, but which defend biodiversity, equal rights, and the land. These Colomboan communities can also be found in other countries in Latin America, such as Honduras, Colombia, Belize, Nicaragua.
pela
We are
ciência e todos vinculados ao
Afro-descendant brothers and
As
sisters,
disputas pelas terras ainda
but
são um grande
fighting
motivo
for the land is a big issue for
disputas
these
mesmo
communities
sempre
because
muito anos
even in the
da
past,
escravidão no Brasil,
over hundreds of years of slavery in
mesmo
Brazil,
cientes
public policies have not been
das
enough
dificuldades
in
sociais
promoting
entre as
social
populações
equality
afrodescendentes no Brasil.
in the
E
Afro-descendant
ainda lutamos
population and
por
communities in Brazil. And so
ainda
we're
não
still
fomos
fighting
capazes
for
de
fundamental
garantir
rights
a
and
educação, a moradia, a
privileges such as access to health
direitos
care,
sexuais e
just
reprodutivos,
labor and
direitos
work,
cidadãos e sociais
education,
que
well,
garantem a vida
basically
com
most of
qualidade.
the rights that guarantee
E
us
sem dúvida que o
a
Brasil ainda pode,
full
inclusive
quality
posteriormente,
life. And so
propositado por uma
we
concepção colonizadora
were looking
em que
at this,
precisávamos
that
enriquecer a população.
we had this colonizing, we're forced into a certain colonizer mentality that we had to get rich, and so that the population would get richer. But most of the Afro-descendants and discriminated communities were the ones that were subjected mostly into slavery and that had the less rights and are the most vulnerable economically and socially, and they're subjected to plenty of hard and manual labor away from their communities, which makes it impossible for them to communicate with their families or to go back home. And the Black communities are the ones that suffer from these harmful effects and are the most vulnerable, including women of color, which very often are subjected to slave labor. And many of these people, they leave their communities, including Quilomboan communities, while they're young, while they're teens, little girls, yes, and they leave to work, as we say, but plenty of times they're just forced into slavery. And our work as defenders of equal rights, equal human rights, and rights for the Quilomboan communities, we're fighting for the rights for these communities in the rural communities to make it so that they do not need to leave their place of origin and go to someplace else where they're made more vulnerable and forced into hard labor, and for us to be able to lead another different type of life. And so I brought here into my presentation, I would please request Johannes to help me with the time so that I don't go over my presentation time. But this is to talk a little bit about some of these problems we need to identify. We need more public policies at the national or regional level where people live in order for them to not need to leave their hometown or home place, and to make sure that they're not isolated and deprived from their own territory and where they're made vulnerable to infringement on their rights. And some of the characteristics of slave labor, we cannot deny the existence of this, and we need to research and consider and think about it, because many of these people, they also end up not being able to adapt into this urban living kind of environment, and so they end up in surrounding areas and they're made vulnerable to exploitation. And so this is a chain of events makes these people that they leave their home place and hometown, they're made vulnerable to infringement on their rights. And so we need to make sure that there is investments in education and that we have a good budget, because Brazil is quite the rural country. The Brazil that you see from outside, this Brazil is kept through very small communities that practice agriculture, traditional communities, and the original peoples that live here, and the richness of the Amazonian forest, and the wealth that the country produces can only be possible because all these people are involved in working, and these are the ones that are more vulnerable to exploitation and slavery. And so we need to ensure their protection. And this is our suggestion. If you're asked me about 3 things we could do to face these difficulties, the first one would be to make sure that the territory is properly mapped. So we have to register the right to property for these communities to live wherein they reside. We have to make sure that these territories are mapped. The Quilombolan and traditional peoples territory is mapped, and to make sure that there's a legal guarantee that they can dwell in those places. And then we also need good budget planning, be it on short, medium, or long term, to make sure that, because if we don't properly budget, then we cannot properly allocate resources into these programs as well. So we have to keep the budget and make sure that we stay on course and that money goes to the rightful proper organizations. And to end it, lastly, education, especially fighting against racism and raising awareness about the difficulties that the Quilombolan community faces, because Quilombolan people, they're very proud of who they are, and they need to fight for their rights. Thank you.
Isabella, thank you very much for your presentations and your 3 points. You know what? I just remembered that I did not introduce you. So please permit me to give a brief introduction to you for everyone over here. Isabella is a young Black Quilombola woman. She holds a degree in history and literature and also has a Bachelor of Law. She is an activist and defender of human rights, titling of the Quilombola territories for the rights of women, youth, and children. She's studying for a master's degree in sustainable development with traditional peoples and territories. Thank you. Thank you very much for talking about the condition of the Quilombolas and of your strategies that you propose. Thank you very much. Next, we have unfortunately on video, because of hurricanes which have affected certain regions in Mauritania, we have our next speaker who would be with us on a video format. Her name is Zainabu Brahim from Mauritania. Zainabu Brahim is the Human Rights Officer at the Sahel Foundation and co-initiator of the Civil Registration Project for Vulnerable Segments. She holds various scholarly degrees, including computer science, as well as a certificate for volunteerism. She has worked previously with the US Peace Corps, World Vision, Dostan, and other organizations working in the field of human rights. Over to Zainabu, who would be presenting through this video.
Collègues, je voulais vraiment d'être avec vous aujourd'hui, mais
Dear colleagues,
apparemment,
I
à
really
cause de la
would have
connexion,
liked to be there
je
with you today,
suis
but my internet connection
obligée
does
de
not
le faire
allow
en
me
audio.
to do so.
Bon,
So
comme
I
je ne
am
peux
forced
pas
to
participer
register my
via Zoom
intervention,
direct. Donc,
and I will
je
take
m'appelle
part
Zinabou
in the
Brahim
meeting this way.
de
I
la
am
Fondation
Zainabou Brahim.
Sahel. une
I work
composante
with the Sahara
sahraoui
Foundation,
activiste dans le droit de l'homme. J'ai travaillé
and I
avec
am
plusieurs
specialized in human rights.
organisations dans ce
I have
domaine.
worked with
J'ai
different
récemment
organizations
rejoint
on this
la
topic,
Fondation
and I
CSL
recently
pour la
joined
défense des droits de
the
l'homme
Sahel
et de la
Foundation to
lutte.
defend human
J'ai
rights.
impressionné par l'engagement des
I
membres
was
de cette
really
fondation
impressed by the
et j'ai
commitment
décidé
of members,
de me rejoindre à eux
and I decided
pour
to
faire
join the
entendre
Sahel
ma voix
Foundation
et
for this
trouver
reason.
un espace dans lequel je
I thought this would be a great platform to work
La
in
communauté
favor
haratine
of
de
human
mon
rights
pays, bien
and of
qu'elle
Haratin
soit la
people.
plus nombreuse et la moins
The
favorisée,
Haratin community
la
is
plus
the
pauvre
most numerous in my country, but is the most
société.
struggling today. It is the poorest of all society. Haratin people are not or very little have very little access to school or resources.
L'esclavage
They very seldom have decision making.
décennies a créé des
Work.
effets sur les
Slavery has been
enfants qui contient
occurring with Haratin people for decades and is leaving lasting
la tendance.
impression on
Mon
children.
engagement dans les défenses du droit de cette
I work
a modifié
to defend the rights of this community,
pour les autres
which is why
victimes
I got interested on other communities that are discriminated on the basis of work and descent.
le roman en Europe, le
Communities such as the Dlits
Japon,
in India, the Aurora in Europe, the Borakumin in Japan, or
les
Quilombolas in
discriminations
Brazil.
à base du travail et d'origine
Discrimination based on work and descent happen in all societies and in all sectors. For example, Haratin people most of the time are working in remote areas. They are not qualified to get a respectable and well-paid job in sectors such as education or health. But because of these people being poor, children most of the time quit studying very early in life and try to find other types of jobs. People from the Haratin community will work as truck drivers, as servants. Women very often are even suffering more than men, twice as much as them actually, because they have to quit studying very early in their lives and to find a husband very early also. They become responsible of the house, of taking care of the children, or become servants in rich people's houses in order to win their daily bread. To try and eradicate all forms of slavery, we underline the urgent need to create institutions at the national, regional, and world level in order to guarantee data and detailed data on slavery at all levels. We call people to have active participation and to create active dialogue with policy actors in order to have a better access of discriminated people in terms of education, health, access to food, to water and sanity, to justice administration, public finances, climate finance, biodiversity, development, urban areas, etc., among other topics. I would like to thank you also and thank the Sahel Foundation for their work with the Haredi community. Many people have to leave school very early and we need to help those people. And we really need to work with them in order to make their lives better. Will help to raise awareness on the issue.
Leur futur. Par exemple, un métier comme des coiffures,
For example, people will be able to access different types of jobs, like they really need to have concrete measures in order to help them find jobs and have a better life in the future. So as I've said at the start of my intervention, I was really impressed by the work that's already been carried out. And I think we should really keep on working on human rights together. Thank you very much.
You know, I'm thankful that we could get Zinabu's video in at the right time, despite the storm. I really appreciate the work she and the Sahel Foundation does. Over to our third speaker for the day. It is Ms. Brisilda Dako from Albania. Brisilda is a Roma rights activist from Tirana, Albania. She holds a BA in Public Relations Communications from the European University of Tirana. She organized advocacy campaigns regarding Roma access to employment, housing, health, and Roma participation in the decision-making process. She was active in various Roma and pro-Roma organizations at local and international levels, such as Roma Kham, Roma Active Albania, the IRCA, Tirana Legal Aid Society, and the Council of Europe, OSBE, ODIHR, OSFA. In 2019, she was awarded as a winner of the Unknown Heroes EU Award for Roma Integration in the Western Balkan and Turkey. She will be speaking on the contemporary discrimination against the Roma people. Ms. Brisilda, over to you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody, dear participants. I'm very happy for being today in this very important event. As I was presented, I am a proud Romani woman from Tirana, Albania. And today I'm going to present our situation in Albania, but even all Europe. As may you know, Roma minority is Europe's largest ethnic minority that estimates a number of 10 till 12 million Roma living in Europe, but approximately 6 million are residents of the EU. Many of EU Roma are still victims of prejudice and social exclusion, despite the discrimination banned across EU member states. The umbrella term Roma, it encompasses diverse groups as Roma, Sinti, Egyptian, Dom, Rom, Kalders, as well travelers. One of the most well-known European mainstream strategy, Europe 2020, talked about inclusive growth by fostering a high employment economy, delivering economic, social, and territorial cohesion, which unfortunately the Roma minority were not an exclusive target of these strategies. And these measures were not reaching them. According to the European Agency for Fundamental Rights, FRA, data from 2021, on average, 43% of Roma aged between 20 to 64 in the country which this survey was, were in paid their work or full-time or part-time work or self-employment or occasional work or hard work in the past 4 weeks of the interviews or of this research. Roma community tends not to work under employment contracts and therefore does not benefit from the payment of health and social contributions. This encourages their future from social protection. The gender employment gap reached an average of 31% points in 2021. 56 of the surveyed Roma aged between 16 to 24 were NEET in 2021. Discrimination experience in employment doubled on average between 2016 and 2021. Every third Roma older than 16 years experienced discrimination due to being Roma when looking for work in the last 12 months. As far as Roma youth themselves are concerned, we would expect that the higher level of their education and the more favorable the region where they live, the greater their access would be to the labor market. However, research made by Roma Education Fund found that Roma are not only underpressed in higher education, they are also underpressed in natural sciences, engineering, manufacturing, and construction, which has a negative impact on their competitive on the job market because the field tends to be the most competitive in the today's EU job market. Based on research conducted by Ergo Network, it was revealed that Roma youth living in disadvantaged areas, mainly in rural areas, are less likely to get jobs compared to living Roma in urban areas. The European Roma Rights Center has shown that public work scheme exacerbate inequality and actually diminish the prospect for many Roma to access the primary labor market. Such scams create a permanent underclass of unskilled workers, increasingly vulnerable and depend upon local political forces. A significant number of Roma are garbage collectors, especially in Albania. We have, let's say, estimated 85% of Roma in Albania is having this job. Despite playing an important social role in protecting the environment, informal waste collectors have been rejected by the entire community. In many cases, their activity is often considered as a crime. Revenue from the waste sorting constantly varies, and they work under clear without pension and health insurance and are subject to blackmail by some waste buyers. Poverty and the urgent need to provide for the basic needs reduce motivation among Roma to attend vocational education training or professional short-term courses and obligates them instead to pursue alternative solutions, usually in the informal labor market. According to the Institution of Romani Culture in Albania, IRCA, from their study in Albania 2020, from 1,000 interviews, 66% of them declared that they are unemployment because of lack of vocational training, lack of professional capacities and appropriate education, no information on employment programs, discrimination at work, lack of urban transport in some Roma settlements, and the majority work in informal jobs specifically is used like clothing trading, recycling materials collection, agriculture, music, tailoring, and hairdressing. We have some recommendation. The recommendations are providing labor market exploration and orientation for Roma employment individuals, providing coaching programs aiming to inform and to prepare Roma for the labor market, offering financial support and business orientation for employment and self-employment, reactivation of artisanal works, musical, culture, and agricultural crops, promotion of the employment initiative program within businesses and Roma community aiming to increase the Roma accessibility in labor market, enhancing Roma women economic power through dedicated employment and self-employment programs. Providing financial literacy courses for Roma. We have so many Romani women and girls which they don't know to write and to read, so the number of literacy are increasing. We have also to the national governments a recommendation as like national governments across the EU have to invest into education that provides professional development and qualification. National government across the EU should also address early school dropout at different levels of education so that Roma young people increase their chances of getting fair jobs. I want to also together with my colleagues, with Simona and Ana Maria, we belong to Roma minority, and me personally didn't feel the discrimination in the labor market, maybe because of my skin color, white skin color, but mostly of my cousins and my friends, they have faced this discrimination because of being a Roma. So we are in the same that discrimination on ethnicity, based on ethnicity, is increasing year by year in countries, especially in Balkan countries, but of course even in European countries. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share our work and to recommend our problems that we face in our daily work here in Albania, but even in European countries. Thank you.
Briselda, thank you very much for your speech and your recommendations. Really appreciate the work you do. Thank you. The next panelist who we have here today is Ms. Aya Matsura. Ms. Aya, thank you very much for joining us today in this conversation. Ms. Aya Matsura is a gender specialist in ILO Decent Work Team for South Asia. She works on gender and equality and also engages with decent work among sanitation workers in Pakistan, India, and Nepal. She and her team has carried out training on occupational safety and health, workers' rights, equality, etc., and reported documenting the situation of sewage and sanitation workers. She has also worked as the chief technical advisor Way Out of Informality project in South Asia for ILO Country Office for India. She will now share her inputs on decent work, occupational safety, and health issues facing people of DWD. Aya, welcome.
Thank you, Vivek. Thank you, colleagues, for having the ILO to share experience, particularly from South Asia. So as you may know, ILO is an organization established in 1919, so over 100 years ago, and we now have a goal of decent work for all. So when we say all, it includes everyone. Of course, when we have different work from the ILO, it's not always that we can cover all workers, but I had the opportunity to receive some project funding from Japanese government to provide support in response to COVID-19. And when we discussed with constituents, government, employers, and workers' organization in India, Nepal, and Pakistan, those project countries, to discuss some of the priority workers who require attention. Sanitation workers came up. So we started doing some activities. So as you may guess, my experience is quite limited, but ILO has important legal framework to promote equality, address discrimination, to support transition from the informal to formal economy, to access decent work, etc. So I would like to share experience from these countries, Pakistan, India, and Nepal. So in Pakistan, we are working a lot with sewage workers, sanitation workers, and traditionally, sewage workers are Christians there. And they may be engaged by municipal corporation, and some of them may have permanent contract, but their work has a lot of decent work deficits in terms of pay, hazard pay. They don't also receive financial support to move from one place to another to clean sewage. They have to arrange their own transport. There's no protective gear, and they also don't have proper leave. And in addition to, of course, permanent workers, they don't have enough workers to cover, especially during rainy season when the sewage gets clogged. So they also engage a lot of daily workers, and they're all Christians. So when we discussed the priority issues with sewage workers, they really wanted to have occupational safety and health. They wanted to have dignity, and they also wanted to have representation and voice, etc. So we started providing different support, including occupational safety and health training, and also working with Pakistan Workers Federation to help organize. So just the background is that these sewage workers were part of Sanitation Workers Union, which is in the municipal corporation. But even within that trade union, often the issues that were important for kind of office sanitation workers were raised. So the issues that were important for sewage workers who were part of the union, they were also not raised. They were not raised. So Pakistan Workers Federation extended support to organize these sewage workers, and they managed to register as trade unions, so they can really advocate to address their issues. So that was, I think, a very important thing for all workers to do. First is to really organize, to strengthen their capacity to negotiate, and also
You've muted
oh my
yourself.
God, sorry, you were not hearing me.
No, it's just the last few seconds. That's okay.
Oh,
You were
I'm
talking of
sorry.
organizing, them
Yes,
gathering together to organize, to
yeah,
strengthen their
workers.
the
Yes.
negotiation.
Yeah, we also facilitated meetings with the government officials, and we also worked on visibilizing the issue, raising the issue. So we supported the production of the video, and we are also publishing a paper documenting the situation of sewage workers in Pakistan. From this experience, what I found very important is, of course, raising awareness on this issue. I think the employer, like municipal corporation, they don't have really understanding on the workers' rights and what are responsible conducts as employers. So that's kind of basic, but we still need to do in countries around here. And also, it was interesting that when we shared the video with workers' organization and employers' organization in Pakistan, these sewage workers were working in Lahore, in Punjab province. When employers' organization saw the video from another province, Karachi, he's from Karachi, he said, "Oh, this is terrible, this is happening. In Karachi, we don't have this." So even within the same country, of course, sometimes issues are not known. And then the Karachi person was sharing, we all use machines, etc. So really, by bringing up the issue, we can really go to the next level of discussing cooperation, identifying solutions. So in terms of what needs to be done, I think we also need to focus on formalizing the job, and improving the job. So sanitation work will be there, but it needs to be the work that is dignified, safe, and that gives job security for family to live, etc. So changes need to happen there. And I think this change also needs to happen in cooperation with different stakeholders, including city planning official, workers' organization, occupational safety and health specialists, etc. Because I think also making the sewage bigger, the size, so that machine can enter, or when people enter, they can enter when they wear protective equipment. That is already an improvement, whereas the sewage in Lahore is very narrow, and it's only really one person who can go almost naked, go inside. So we really need to make improvement in the work arrangements. And of course, we need to formalize jobs by recognizing that they are workers and they need to receive pay and have access to social protection, pension, etc., and leave days. And then also for women workers, of course, maternity protection. And I think it is also important to think about special measures, especially for children, to have access to education. Because, for example, in case of India, I think there is also, also same in Pakistan, but there's this generation of families working in manual scavenging or sanitation work. And when education can be provided to children of these families, they have a better chance of getting different jobs. So I think that specialized measure needs to be also in place. And we also need to advocate for policy on sanitation work, and then also national budget. What I saw also in Nepal is that there is no kind of public budget for managing waste. So it's all dependent on initially NGO trying to work on waste. And now that's privatized as a company. So neighborhoods paying for the garbage collection, and then companies managing. And even companies that are managing garbage collection, they have to pay to the government to bring the garbage to the dump site. So there is really no public budget. So this is something that country need to think about to secure budget to cover basic necessity for hygiene, everybody's well-being, etc. Also, the importance of formalization, I realized, is also because when I went to the garbage site in Nepal, I could see the employment relationship is very complex. So at the garbage collection site, garbage segregators are working. They are mostly women from indigenous background or low caste background. And they are engaged by contractor who pays the owner of the collection site so that they can collect some recycling materials like plastic bottles. And then this contractor pays money based on the weight of the plastic bottles collected to the worker. So discussion like occupational safety and health, need to ensure good welfare facilities at the garbage site. Contractor will not do it. But then, of course, the owner of the garbage site is also not engaging segregators, so they would not also see the responsibilities. Therefore, we also don't have good mechanism to ensure good welfare facilities, safety, and health working condition. So really making this, I think, system visible to highlight the problem and then work on formalizing these workers' contract arrangement, I think that is very important. And we are also working on a report in India. And then in this report, focusing on manual scavenging, we see that really packaged approach is required, engaging different stakeholders. So it's not, so for example, manual scavengers in India, there are to be, kind of this job is to be eliminated. But when India was working on, eliminating open defecation, they created a lot of toilet, which was not the modern system. So they needed to recruit fresh group of manual scavengers to clean those toilets. So we also need, I think, collaborative work with those who know about how to build a toilet that doesn't require cleaning by people, but it requires some, can be done by machine or technology or some bio items, etc. So we really need to, I think, work with different stakeholders. And then I think we also need some kind of platform. Maybe there is already in India that I'm not aware of because I'm pretty new in this field. But I think it's good to have kind of committee to continue to pressure government to implement existing law and measures and monitor and then also present recommendations. So I think I talked a lot, so I will stop here. But thank you very much for the opportunity.
Aya, thank you very much for your presentation and for your recommendations and strategies, especially as you dealt with South Asia, a region I'm more familiar with. So thank you for your service. Now, this is to all of you. Thank you for hanging in here. This is the moment we are going to open the forum up for each of for y'all to ask clarifying, that's the first thing, for y'all to ask any clarifying questions to the panelists who are here. And secondly, if you have any recommendations to make, I would say this is also the time for that. But again, just a word of caution. I know we are all excited about this topic, and you might be tempted to go on a long discourse about what you're excited to contribute. So I would request you to, if there is some recommendation you want to make, my request is for you to make it really short and just be conscious that there are other people who want to speak likewise. So again, to the floor, could I request I see a few hands up. I'm just going to go by who has raised their hands. Okay, so Pirbu, welcome.
Thank you very much, Aya, for the detail, the information on the sanitation work in Pakistan, India, and Nepal. My name is Pirbu Satyani. I am based in Pakistan and working on the Dalit issues, sanitation workers from the last few years. I just wanted to, though she has already, they explained the situation, how the sanitation community work in these countries and which condition and that, the job status and evolving everything. Number one, in the Pakistan, the majority of the people, they are from the Christian community, but still in other parts, like in Punjab, they are the Christian, but in the Sindh province, the majority of them, they are from the Hindu lower caste. Number one. Number second, in Pakistan, the minority, the religious minority counts 4%. And within the religious minority, if you see the 80%, they belong to the low caste, whether they are scheduled caste or the Christian low caste. And the 4%, the minority and the Dalit community, they are the 4%. But if you see the sanitation force labor, they are 80 to 90%. They carry this, this work. So whenever the government, they announce the sanitation workers positions to hire the sanitation workers, they clearly mention that only the Christian and Hindus can apply for this job. So you can see this is how the government, the state treat to the minorities within the country. On the other side, those people, they are working in this field since centuries. Their socioeconomic condition, the people, they are from their 10 to 15 years, though they are not on the regular position, they are on the contract position through the third party. And they are not given, the minimum wage. And again, you have already mentioned there are so many other challenges. There are no safety gears. In the COVID, they were the frontline defenders, they were in the health, but they were not provided all these safety equipments. So there are multiple challenges, but states somewhere, they self-discriminate and they prefer to hire this from these communities. Though the constitution clearly mentioned there will be no discrimination, their position will be on the merits, all these things. But again, on the ground, these are the things. ILO, I know, even I can remember a few months back, we organized the one of a provincial level consultation on sanitation worker through Sindh Human Rights Commission. And we invited the ILO, and the ILO representative came in that consultation, and they briefed on the recent work and all these things. But I could not see their ILO's work with the civil society. They are with the government, more with the government, the worker federation. The worker federation themselves, they do not consider the sanitation worker in their, even I could not see the representative of sanitation worker in the worker federation. So why they are with the worker federation? They should be with the civil society, with those organizations. They are directly working on the, with the sanitation workers' rights. So just my suggestion is ILO should focus, and ILO has good mechanism, good understanding. They work globally, and they should also the views from the civil society. Those organizations, they are on the ground, and not only in the one province but throughout the country. So this is just my suggestion. I think my question, and it's a just suggestion. Yeah, thank you.
Prabhu, thank you very much. Over to Dr. Niloufar Banu.
Yeah, my question, just my one question to Aya. She studies in Pakistan, India, and Nepal. Why not Bangladesh? Situation is almost same.
Niloufar, we are unable to hear you. Are you speaking?
We can
Yes,
hear
I'm speaking.
actually quite okay. Maybe just a technical glitch that you cannot hear her. I'll brief you on the chat. Okay. You can maybe then take the next speaker while I tell you. Please go ahead, Dr. Niloufar. Please go ahead. Finish your point.
Okay. Just I am asking Aya. She studies in Pakistan, India, and Nepal. Then why not Bangladesh? Bangladesh situation is almost same like three countries, but they are very deprived. They are running through very problematic way. My suggestion is ILO should study in Bangladesh. Do their study in Bangladesh also. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Now, thank you for your intervention. Yes, there seems to be a problem with some of the people who cannot hear you, but I will brief you in the chat, maybe while we listen to the next speaker, but over to Vivek for the moderation.
Okay.
Thank you, Johannes and Niloufar. Unfortunately, some of us could not hear you, but thankfully, Johannes is going to put it on the chat. Now, over to Abu Bakr Ajera. Welcome to the forum, and please speak.
Merci mes amis. Tout d'abord, je salue mes amis Johannes. Je salue
Thank you, dear friends.
Thank you very much. I'd
Thank
like
you,
first to
Johannes.
thank Johannes. I would like to thank the moderator also, Mr. Vivek Jones. Thank you, everyone. I am called Abu Bakrin Algeri. I am an expert. I work on advocacy and on law and on discrimination. I was very interested in what Ms. Brahim said, and I would like to inform you that we are very glad to be able to take part in this meeting, in this side event. And we would like to affirm that we are glad to take part in this forum, working on communities discriminated on the basis of work and descent. It is the case of a Haredi in Mauritania. There is a major problem for Haredi in Mauritania, which is the following. Most Haredim people work in manual jobs. People from those communities are therefore discriminated, and they have a difficult access to work and to different types of jobs. They work as servants, for example, they work in houses, and they often suffer discrimination because of the type of work they do. They are discriminated on the basis of descent also, not only work. And Haredim, most of the time, are not really trained or educated. They are not qualified, which is a problem. And we try to understand how to change this. But Haredi people are producing things, are working hard, but they do not have access to the fruits of their labor. Why? Because their masters, their employers are stealing the fruits of their efforts. They are working, for example, in agriculture, but the earth, the land does not belong to those people. The land is the property of their masters. And so when those people are working, they have to actually pay something to the master and the owners of the lands, which is, of course, a big problem in terms of access to work. Haredim people work in crafts. They are working in second-grade jobs. I have many workers that have a very low remuneration when they are from this group. So the Haredim community, and I am part of this community, has a big problem. I work as a law expert, so I do not face the same problems as others, but most of the community is facing those problems. People are, in a way, enslaved. They are excluded from society and they face different sorts of problems. For example, those people have no access to water, to sanitation. Why? Because they may live in desert areas. They are deprived of any water and they cannot work on the land because there's no water. And so they are discriminated, of course, on the basis of their work and their descent. And we really need the Global Fund to help us in order for this community to have access to decent working conditions and to an actual job, because most of the time people of this descent have no way of getting any real jobs. They work in the streets, they work in the informal economy, and they are not trained. They have no access to school. There was a law making education mandatory for people in the country, but we still suffer from different types of discrimination linked to poverty. Haredi people work in slums, for example. or they live in precarious lodgings. We see that they are really struggling with poverty in their everyday life. And with the Global Fund, we saw real problems of access to education. And we try to really focus on those problems and to put the climate justice also at the center of our work. We managed to show that the question of climate justice was fundamental because people live in rural areas are not able to efficiently move in the country. And so in the end, they suffer from a climate discrimination. But one solution is actually to apply what laws already exist. There is a law against slavery. There is also a law on human traffic. There is a law linked to the Convention on Children's Rights also that we should apply. And this would help us struggle against discrimination and solve the different problems of our community. So I would really like to thank you for giving us the floor today. And I hope we could work together. We will work together again to solve the problems of this community. So thank you very much. And thank you also to all my friends I see here.
Thank you.
Lagbata, I see different people
Thank you
on the
very
call.
much. Thank you very much, Abu
everyone.
Bakrin. I would like to, request two more people to speak. And first of all, Paul, I would like to invite you to speak. There's some things you've already mentioned on the chat, which I think is a very critical intervention required as we discuss this topic. So please, Paul, if you could address that a bit. And then after you, Paul, the last person I would like to invite, again, briefly, Naveen Gautam, if you could also speak a bit about the disaggregated data, I think that would also be helpful. So first Paul, and then over to Naveen.
Thank you, Vivek. Thank you, friends. It's a honor to listen and to also be in solidarity with this. Paul Divakar, I'm the convener of the Global Forum of Communities Discriminated on Work and Dissent. I think two things. I think Ms. Aya has very clearly brought out the work aspect of the very extreme forms of inhuman conditions that certain communities, specifically those who are involved in manual scavenging. And I think, I'm sure she's aware that as all the other speakers also have mentioned, even Abu Bakrin has mentioned that, even Isabella and Brasilda and other colleagues, Zinabu, have also mentioned that there is a clear link between the social origin and the degrading forms, the forced labor, the trafficking, and other forms of inhuman work that has pushed us. And I think the high-level political forum with the SDGs has this target 8.7, elimination of all forms of forced labor. And some of the things, or most of the things that we have talked about here, come under some definition of forced labor or trafficking. And there are many more it has to be captured. And when we are talking about work, unfortunately, in most of these societies, the link with the social origin, the hereditary, it is not everybody who doesn't have work or everybody who is poor is forced into these. Yes, there are outliers. There are some persons are drawn into this. But as a practice, as form of a cultural intervention that is taking place in many of these hierarchies, like for example, in entire Nepal, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and India, these forms are mostly forced onto communities that are affected by the caste who are the lowest rung. and we call it earlier untouchables. Now politically we call ourselves as Dalits. In different communities, in different countries, they're known differently. And also, not only here, I think as Zinabu and Honorable Abu Bakreen has also mentioned, it is similar that they have been enslaved and then forced into these occupations. So I think I was just following the Commission on Social Development, and I was quite surprised to look at the aspect intergenerational. I thought fantastic, Commission on Social Development, UN Commission on Social Development does recognize this. But when I look at what is intergenerational in that link, and then what they were talking about is intergenerational in the terms of family, in terms of age, in terms of passing on the knowledge systems. But we are not talking about that kind of intergenerational. We're talking about a cultural practice of hierarchy, which has pushed certain communities intergenerationally. And if you look at all these communities, my mother, father, and grandfather, and generation before generation have all been forced into these forms of forced occupations, trafficking, and it is not only, and it is, these works are also seen as polluted forms of work, and therefore it allows the community to treat them inhumanely. So I think that part needs to have as further interventions in terms of ensuring that it is outlawed. And in many countries, as again Abu Bakr said, it is outlawed, but it's not implemented. In India, untouchability is an offense, but it's practiced in the form of manual scavenging, in the form of bonded labor, in the form of child labor, in the form of other trafficking. So these, I think, we need to convey, and we definitely ILO has identified these communities in the form of their work. But if you can build the social location part of it, and then have recommendations to combine together with decent work, we also outlaw systems that force communities into these occupations, because without that, you have to continuously a flow of communities which are forced into this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. And over to Naveen.
Thank you. There is some issue with the network, so my video might be switched off. So yeah, I mean, that was an important point I just realized I need to add in the end. As we are all, some in one manner or another, we are the researchers, also activists, but we are also the researchers. That's why there is a need to first understand the difference between what is an aggregated data and what is actually a disaggregated data. Disaggregated data, if you move deeper into understanding that what is the aggregated data, that is something which is breaking down into smaller information units, and it's like a critical step to ensure policy level implementation. And of course, if you talk about the whole fight, in fact, getting into the more political structure of the country, India also, so there is a fight within the country to have some. We can even talk about the whole socioeconomic situation of the country as a whole. So that is something I wanted to add, because disaggregated it can actually play a critical role in helping us understand how effective they are for us to get more richer information, challenges which they have been facing, in order to get a deeper understanding of the policy itself, and also what needs to be implemented in a better manner, not only for the CSOs, that also helps the governments. If we talk about framing policies on finances or budgets, and also if we if we talk about a number of households which a DWD community member holds in a country, so we will also understand. We don't even it's not like we just have a number, how many number of people are homeless. We also need further information that how many people are on the streets and how many people have hut houses. So that also help us understanding better information. That is like, there's so much on disaggregated data, but I would like to end over here. And thank you.
Naveen, thank you very much. A very important piece, which is especially useful for as we head to change policies. I think it is very critical to have that kind of disaggregated data to study and work on. Dear colleagues, dear comrades, those of us who are in solidarity for this cause, I really appreciate your presence in this forum. I know there are some of y'all who would like to continue this conversation, and y'all raised your hands, but unfortunately, we'll have to end the session. But before we end, let me just, again, I'm so thankful for the eminent panelists that we had today, and I would like to briefly summarize some of the recommendations that they had presented. And so, Ms. Isabella de Cruz from Brazil, who works among the Quilombolas, a few things that she recommended, and again, I'm just surprised. Maybe I should not be surprised, how much of commonalities are there across the globe with these communities. And some of these recommendations I can see are universal in its appeal. So one of the recommendations she said is, make sure their territory is properly mapped and there are legal guarantees for them to dwell in their places. Legal guarantees. I would add protection from, again, the perpetrators, who usually, at least in South Asia, usually the perpetrators are right in that neighborhood. So yes, yes, and yes to that. She had also spoken about budget planning, that, there should be the short-term, medium-term, long-term budget set apart for that. Education is something else she spoke about, because this kind of education and awareness fights against systemic racism. So again, thank you for those recommendations, Isabella. We had Zinabu, who gave us a video presentation, and she also spoke about the urgent need to build institutions at national levels, regional levels, and global levels to ensure that there is a good data on slavery, and also for good dialogues to happen between political actors and the CSOs to give those the access to these discriminated communities with respect to education, health, food, nutrition, water, sanitation, administration of justice, finance, etc. We had Ms. Briselda, who gave some excellent strategies to go forward. Some of it is, is really related to the labor markets, of opening it up, mapping it out for the orientation of the Roma communities. She had talked about providing coaching programs for these vulnerable people, offering financial support for businesses amongst them, reactivation of artisanal work. It's so surprising that many of these communities originally, even in India, pre-colonial eras, were artisanal workers, and reactivation of that and bringing that dignity to their labor. She also spoke about providing financial literacy courses for the communities. There are other recommendations she made. And finally, Ms. Aya spoke about a few things, but one of the things she did speak about was about formalizing the jobs. I think, at some point we have to face the reality that someone needs to do the job. And I think we live in these societies, the work needs to be done. And one way of tackling it does not root out the evil, the systemic evil that many of us are passionate about, but formalizing the job in terms of the kind of pay they get, the social protection that is in place, the leaves, the maternity benefits, all that should be in place. If there is a job, That should be secure, it should be protected, there should be some level of dignity and access that they get even in those jobs. So improving the jobs is something else she spoke about. Special measures for children should be considered, is something she spoke about, where education can be provided, and that in some way is going to help the next generation. Personally, even in my own experience in some of these different cities in South Asia, one of the things we found is that it takes 3 generations. Unfortunately, it does take 3 generations in my experience for them to come out of this. So we are in this for the long game. And I think we need to have a plan and energy for that long run too. And of course, she also mentioned about advocating for national policies on managing waste. There needs to be public budgets allocated for these to happen. And finally, again, Paul and Naveen also intervened with some useful suggestions, which I think should really go into policy level work, which is taking seriously the fact that dissent is a vital part of this conversation. It is the social inclusion, it is a systemic exclusion and oppression over decades and centuries. And it is so difficult to get out of that trap. I use the word trap. It is a social trap, and people are born into that trap. And unless we actively work towards that, we are, year on year, we'll be beating on the same issues, putting lipstick on dead bodies. That's what we will be doing. And finally, again, disaggregated data, something Naveen had suggested, is very useful for policy making. All of y'all over here, I'm sure many of you over here have more excellent inputs to give, but I'm sorry, we'll have to close the conversation at this point. I am extremely thankful for the panelists and their contribution. I am also very grateful to each of you, different time zones across the world, who have contributed in different ways in this conversation. I would encourage you to take the message that you have received, work in your respective places. You might be part of some CSOs, NGOs. Go forth and make the world a better place. And that's the mandate that each of us have. And so, A, we cannot do that alone. We need each other. B, we need to network and let a hurricane not just be in Mauritania, but at a policy level, be even in such forums where we can take it at the ILO, at the UN, and at various forums, making this issue loud and clear, till there are national, international policies which can monitor and control these systems at play. So once again, thank you, dear friends. Let's continue the good work.